Hi everyone, I'm Lea. I've seen a few familiar faces from especially like the maker team, but those who don't know me, I'm Lea. I'm partnerships lead at Scroll, and today I want to talk about obviously Scroll a little bit, but also ZK rollups, and that hopefully in a way where you can follow along if you're not a cryptographer. And also, given recent events, or like given the last couple of weeks, I also want to touch upon building this scaling architecture in a way that's is decentralized and where we can ensure censorship resistance. And yeah. Okay. So starting with Scroll and ZK rollups, just as a short refresher for those who don't spend their time every day thinking about L2s, just want to reiterate the differences between optimistic rollups and ZK rollups. This is a very short, very incomplete comparison, but it has the most important differentiators. So you have different network participants that manage the data and send these compressed data bundles from L2 to L1. And the main differentiation in these two setups or solutions is the verification method. So for optimistic rollups, transactions are assumed as valid, and they work with fraud proofs and economic incentives. Whereas you have in the ZK rollups, you have validity proofs that are based on zero knowledge proofs or basically on mathematical proofs. So working with these fraud proofs means that you have this challenging period. So you do have longer withdrawal periods. The drawback for ZK rollups is that, at least currently, it has higher approval complexity, so it's more costly than optimistic rollups. But industry consensus is that going forward, or like long term, ZK rollups will be much more scalable than optimistic. And so if you've been to DEF CON or if you have been on crypto Twitter recently, you're probably under the impression that everyone currently is building a ZK EVM. And there is quite a few teams working on this. And I find it myself sometimes a bit difficult, or this is like questions that we get asked a lot. What's the difference between those? What are the different approaches? Like, how can I keep an overview of the landscape? And I think two super helpful concepts or like approaches to be aware of is one, language level compatibility and bytecode level compatibility. So there's this sort of bucket of projects that have the approach of language level compatibility, which means if I choose that approach, I have a custom VM. I don't have the EVM, which makes it a lot more friendly for this ZK proof. So proving and verification, this part becomes a lot more easy. Or a lot more efficient. And then you have the bytecode level compatibility bucket. This is also where Scroll lies in. And that means you can basically redeploy any EVM bytecode directly. And there is no language restriction. So as long as your developer language it can be compiled in EVM bytecode, you can start using it on these types of projects, including Scroll. Another way to look at it is also to look at it that way. So you have the spectrum where you can optimize for proving efficiency or for compatibility. So for the projects that optimize for prover efficiency, they are faster and cheaper at the moment. There are a couple of drawbacks. So for example, if your code is audited on a bytecode level, it has to be re-audited. And as a developer, you basically have to trust the integrity of their team's compiler, but also their VM architecture, and whether it's audited or not. And then if you move along the path of compatibility, it becomes like overall composability becomes more easy for projects that deploy on those types of projects. And so if you look at Scroll's approach, as I mentioned already, we fall in this for us compatibility or like bytecode level compatibility is really important. So we want to make use of the existing Ethereum infrastructure. So we don't want our developers or the developer community to spend any time learning a new language or learning any new tools, but just like to focus on, okay, I have contracts, I want to deploy them, here you go. There is, so this whole like the circuits and also the entire like proving mechanism, it is quite complex, and we want to abstract that away as much as possible from the user. So we don't want you to have to care about how this actually works, but just to take your contracts and deploy. And then overall, the EVM is really battle tested, and there's a lot of infrastructure built around, security infrastructure built around it. And that's why we want to stick to it and at the same time provide scalability. I feel like this is moving a bit. Okay. What we've been up to, what we've been up to. So we are currently live on our pre-alpha testnet, and it's a permission testnet. We're opening it up, or we'll be on Girly quite soon. And what we have been doing is we have been working with external. We have been working with external partners to already start or to basically start validating what we have been talking about all the time. So we have had first projects to deploy on our testnet, and the feedback so far has been really good. It has been really smooth. We're focusing obviously on existing tools and to make sure that developers have the same sort of tools and like building blocks also available on Scroll. And we're working with the usual suspects. We have had Lens deploy a couple of weeks ago. If you look close enough, you'll see some alpha on like what's coming next. But overall, that process has been really great. At the same time, research and making this research also available to the wider community is really important to us. So we have different initiatives that think about, okay, what's next, what comes after L2. We have, the way we approach it is we have internal working groups that drive research on different topics, and that can range from, for example, privacy-enabled L3 SDKs, account abstraction, L2 MEV, and our goal is to maybe start these initially and like drive them, but then also open it up to the community. And we've had several initiatives that that we already sort of open sourced. We have, for example, a ZK reading group that's held, I think, like on a weekly basis. So if that's something that's interesting to you, also feel free to reach out to me afterwards. And at the very beginning, so I thought, okay, maybe I already maybe start wrapping up here, but then especially after the recent events, I thought maybe it's really good for us to iterate or like bring up the topic again, that we why we're here in the first place. We want to build infrastructure that's decentralized and censorship resistant. But when, especially in a bull run or when something goes really well, it's super easy to lose sight of that, and we get attracted by shiny headlines or like big yield, etc. And then we kind of forget about the fact that, oh, decentralization actually matters. It doesn't matter until it does. So we've had just the last 2 weeks seeing again that like billions of funds have either been stolen or frozen. And I think we can do better as a whole industry. So I want to spend a little bit of time on decentralization, censorship resistance. And I know it's been annoying, like seeing all these headlines and having actually these headlines dominate the narrative about crypto. And I do agree we should focus more on builders, and we should also celebrate the achievements that we had. Like we had actually the merge happening this year, so it finally happened. But we've also, and I think like the ZK EVM space, as Vitalik mentioned here, is like one space where we've had a lot of development that actually exceeded everybody's expectations. And that is really, really cool. But at the same time, I think we need to just like, while we're building this, also be aware that there are certain components, certain risks that, we just all need to be aware of, and I think where we need to do a better job of explaining those to people. And I quoted Bartek here because he is the one that is like constantly who's like constantly not only like focusing on ZK rollups, but like rollups in general, just to like highlight and make that more accessible, and the entire LTB team. And so if you follow that topic, Vitalik has recently published a blog post where he's talking about, okay, what are the training wheels of rollups, and it is super tricky to, or impossible to like deploy a production-ready rollup. That's something that never has been done before, and there is certain components that just we need to like gradually approach. But what he also says in here is that the projects should also that are working on this should also hold itself maybe to a higher standard, or like to just make sure that it's clearly communicated where we're at, and where we're at. So let's okay. And this is like this is a nowhere near complete overview of all the different things that are important for L2 decentralization, but I think these are like the main components that people should be aware of. And so you have here prover and sequencer. So you the prover, as I mentioned before, is responsible for validity proofs and ensures state correctness. And then you have the sequencer that generates L2 blocks and submits to L1. And ideally you want to have those active participant clients like run permissionlessly, or at a minimum have a permissionless fallback option, because if that's not in place, that can have an effect on the liveliness of your network, and can basically halt the protocol and then freeze your funds. And as I said, we currently run a permission testnet. So the prover in our setup currently is centralized, but we do have on our roadmap that we will be outsourcing the proofs before hitting mainnet, and that's the way we approach it. Most likely is that we're going to start permission and then decentralize gradually. For the sequencer, there is more research done within our team, and we have a couple of people that are working on this actively. It's a little bit more complicated, it requires more economic guarantees, and how we currently view is we'll probably start centralized, then permission it before decentralizing it fully. And then the next component, so withdrawal and force exit. That is, when you notice that, for example, a sequencer or like your transaction is being censored, that you are still able to submit an L1 transaction to claim your funds. And what's really important here, and I think that's important for all of these components, is that you have source availability for the bridge and the state transition enforcement implementation. And ideally you have that open source, but source code availability should be the minimum requirement. And why this is also so important, not just also for other components, is, for example, you could have a prover, but if you are not able to verify what it actually proves, or if it proves something, then that's also bad. And there's also a lot like research still to be done, but we'll have a gradual implementation of that. And then the last one, which has been debated a lot in this field as well, is upgradability, because Vitalik had this one talk at Rollup Day. That's the event that we hosted one day before DEF CON, where he talked about this topic, and he said the PSE ZKVM has around, not quite, but roughly 35,000 lines of code, and it's extremely complex, and we don't expect it to be 100% bug-free from the get-go. So you want to have a way to react in case something's wrong. But what you don't want is instant upgradability, because basically you can have like all these precautionary measures on the other components, but then if you allow for instant upgradability, but basically what people could do is just like deploy a malicious implementation of the bridge, for example, and then just like run away with your funds. The result of all of this, if it's not done properly, is freeze of funds or steal funds. And what it comes down to here, and this is for all networks, it will go through different maturity states. So this interaction of like trust in a specific group of humans versus trust in code, that's sort of like a spectrum where we'll hopefully move more and more towards the trust in code when the network reaches a higher maturity. And I just named here ZK Sync. They have a 9 out of 15 multisig that's operated by a security council. Ideally, that has a lot of external parties, and it's not only made up of the project working on this, and they have a 3-week delay. So what that means is, in case there's supposed to be an upgrade, but the Security Council interjects. They have 3 weeks to time to like overwrite this. And there's other lines of thoughts where you could potentially only freeze the rollup and have the community take a vote, or the talk that I mentioned earlier is where Vitalik talks about multi-prover mechanisms. Overall, that's like still a research field within the community, and I'm referencing here my colleague Togrul. So if you want to learn more about this, or if you want to follow along that active discussion and research, you should go follow him. He's probably much more qualified talking about this than I am. But yeah, so this is more or less, you can view it as a conversation starter and not like a fully fledged plan yet. But like summing up, so if you look at the landscape for L2s again, or like ZK rollups, and you don't know necessarily where to locate Scroll, you can think of this as the world that we focus on EVM equivalence. So we focus on this. We are in this compatibility bucket. There is a lot of research still to be done, but we're actively working on this gradual implementation of decentralizing the prover and the sequencer network. And we are on pre-alpha testnet now, on Girly soon, and then we're planning for mainnet next year, mid 2023. So overall, this will not only be a really exciting year for us, for Scroll, but we have other teams here in the room as well. So there's a lot gonna be happening in this space. And I think we'll see a lot of exciting new initiatives as well. But at the same time, when like in the prospect of receiving all these like great news, this project deployed, this partnership has been done, we hit certain like milestone X. Let's also just like always keep in mind, and I think that is also something that needs to be driven by the projects themselves, to keep each other accountable, that we keep decentralization in mind and censorship resistance. And that's all I have for today. Thank you. And sorry. And here, if you want to try it out, there's the pre-alpha testnet. Join our Discord server if you want to join the discussion or want to work with us. And then if you actually want to work with us, you can check out our job board. We have a few roles open, both technical and non-technical. So yeah, that's us. Yeah, questions.
Thank you very much. I have a bit of challenge that it wasn't that much for non-cryptographers, in the sense that it would be interesting to hear your opinion. It will be interesting to hear your opinion on what's the biggest challenges for your partners that experiment with zk-scroll, apart from, oh, we don't have cryptographers in the team. Like, what is their view on using testing and stuff, especially when now I see that lots of rollups are using lots of logotypes on their websites, and they don't specify what's happening there within their clients. So I assume that lots of projects do this kind of logo dropping, and then not much of things are happening. So can you specify, let's say, the biggest challenges that the partners should take within their journey with you or other rollups?
Yep. So I think there are several things. So on one side, obviously, there's a lot of different L2s. So like if you make a decision on which L2 to deploy, there's not only ZK rollups, but there's also optimistic rollups. So you kind of want to get a sense of where the ecosystem is going, and everybody probably has their little flavors of like what is more important to this particular ecosystem. So for example, for us, we have our origin is with the Ethereum Foundation. So this is how we started out. So the developer community will always be important to us, and like work with the community on potentially specific features. So if you are a project that has specific requirements that maybe is not necessarily possible on there right now, is like, are we willing to work with them on that? And then, for example, if that falls into our research priorities, then that would be a consideration for them. Okay, cool, we can potentially work with Scroll on that together. And then it's like at least the feedback that we've gotten, and that might be different for others, is the ease of the deployment. Is it really possible to have a deployment out of the box, basically, like what I've said with, as long as your code, like as long as your developer language is compilable, or it can be compiled in EVM bytecode, you can just like go. We're currently in this verification phase, so like working with projects, okay, is it really that easy? Or does it still like need tweaks, or does it need, will I need resources from my engineering team to actually be able to cater to that? So there's like several like spectrums on where you can pinpoint. Then also on the projects or on the external partner side, you probably also have priorities on where you're willing to maybe compromise, or where you're willing to, like, what's important to you to go after. Does that answer your question? No? Okay, good. We can also talk about it a little bit later.
Hello. Just a quick one. I was looking at your website just to see more technical documentation, such as like how I can set up everything in locally, that kind of stuff. Do you have any pointer to all the references?
Yeah, I can. I think I don't have it on the slide, but I can share with you afterwards. Yeah, cool. And also, one of my colleagues will be here tomorrow as well. He's one of our engineers. He will be on the panel for L2 security. In case you're interested in diving a little bit more deeper, he will also be there to answer also more technical questions that you have.
Can I ask one more question? So you had a kind of diagram of like a compatibility and efficiency, and you mentioned like if the more efficient one tend to be more complex, so that you have to trust their platform developer to do the right job. But in terms of developer, given that's bug free, is there any other consequence of like, is it harder to integrate, or like something like, if I'm especially interested in I work at ENS and we do lots of integrations, and one thing that we are keen is to verify L2 state on L1, and I realize like lots of rollup platform, they don't necessarily have library support. For these, first, do you guys have support for helping dApps to verify state of L2 and L1? And also, is that tend to be more, the ones on the left side are more harder to do compared to the right side?
You probably have to learn. You would have to learn like additional like features, or like sometimes even like an additional language to be able to use it. So there is that component. So there is this extra step, but then yeah, as you said, like there is this component of like trust within the project. In terms of libraries, etc., I can connect you to someone from my team to like go a bit more deeper in it. Yeah.
I have a quick question. Could you go a little bit deeper into the concept of EVM equivalence instead of EVM compatibility?
Yeah. So what there is like there's also a really good. I don't want to shill the roll update too much. But there is actually like a panel that goes into detail of that in roll update. I will give you the link later on. But it's basically like moving more into like the direction of like, okay, really reusing the infrastructure that we already have on Ethereum L1. So for example, we use a fork of Geth for the sequencer, and really trying to reuse as much infrastructure, L1 infrastructure on L2 as well.
Question on, I guess, the future of rollups, in the sense that I've heard a lot of people say that optimistic rollups have kind of a centralization effect where, scale makes them cheaper for gas fees. Do you see this as a challenge, I guess, for Scroll? Or like, do you have a different opinion on what the future for rollups is going to be? Or anything? How do you see that? I guess as a dev, like, should I focus on deploying on all? Should I focus on choosing a few winners?
Focus on deploying on Scroll, obviously. No. Yeah, so I think like the overall consensus is that like from like scaling throughput or like transaction throughput, that ZK rollups are like superior to optimistic rollups. And like what you said with like the centralization part, I think like every rollup, as I touched upon, has like different components, and I can see like that there is like a co-development or co-evolvement of both rollups in the next years, and I think it depends also a little bit on what you're building, on what is specific to your project. Maybe an optimistic rollup might be like a better implementation for you over. It depends on, for example, are you, at least for now, is it important for you that this withdrawal period, even though there are like methods to like bypass that, but it's like again yet another third party that needs to be trusted. So is that really important to you? Or like high frequency trading, is that more important for you that like the prover is like really efficient and really fast? So it depends a little bit on what your needs for your dApp are. But also maybe keeping in mind that why CK rollups exceeded expectations recently was, of course, also research, but then also advancements in hardware. So I also expect the hardware to improve, which will make it faster and easier to generate these proofs. Okay, cool. Then thanks. I'll be here around in case you have more questions.